A shocking scene was unfolding in front of Buckingham Palace that would change royal protocol forever. Royal Guard James Richardson, with 15 years of distinguished service, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, had never experienced such systematic humiliation in his entire military career. A growing mob of tourists had completely surrounded him, treating this decorated soldier like a street performer, a human statue, a piece of entertainment put there solely for their amusement. The crowd was getting bolder by the minute, laughing hysterically, recording everything from multiple angles. Some were even live-streaming the entire degrading spectacle to thousands of viewers worldwide. They were treating this man, who had sworn an oath to protect the realm with his life, like he was nothing more than a carnival attraction. And then, that unmistakable figure emerging from the ornate palace gates, walking with purpose and barely contained fury, was about to change everything forever. What Queen Camilla did next didn't just shock the tourists who were tormenting her guard. It sent shockwaves around the entire world and sparked a global conversation about respect, dignity, and what it truly means to be a tourist in someone else's country. But before we reveal the unprecedented action that Queen Camilla took that day, something that broke centuries of royal protocol, you need to understand exactly how we got to this breaking point, because what happened next wasn't just a moment of royal intervention. It was a complete dismantling of everything these disrespectful tourists thought they knew about consequences, power, and basic human decency. It was Tuesday, March 15th, 2024, and the early morning spring air carried the usual sounds of London awakening. Guard James Richardson had taken his position at exactly 8:01 a.m., following the same ritual he had performed for over 15 years. His red tunic was immaculate, every button polished to perfection. His bearskin cap, a symbol of military honor dating back centuries, sat proudly on his head. His rifle was positioned with military precision. The first few hours had been blissfully normal. Respectful tourists took photos from an appropriate distance. Some children waved shyly from behind their parents, and a few visitors even nodded in acknowledgement of his service. This was how it was supposed to be. This was the dignified interaction between the public and those who served the crown. But at approximately 10:47 a.m., everything began to change. A group of 20-something social media influencers had arrived at the palace gates with ring lights, professional cameras, and most importantly, a complete lack of respect for anything beyond their own quest for viral content. They had clearly planned this visit as a content creation opportunity, viewing the royal guards not as human beings, but as props in their elaborate social media theater. Leading the group was Marcus Chen, a 24-year-old TikToker from California with 2.3 million followers who specialized in what he called extreme tourist challenges. His girlfriend, Emma Rodriguez, had 1.8 million Instagram followers and was known for her disruptive travel content. Together, they had built their entire online brand around pushing boundaries, breaking social norms, and creating controversy wherever they went. "Okay, guys, this is going to be epic," Marcus announced to his friends while simultaneously live-streaming to his audience. "We're at Buckingham Palace, and I'm about to do something that's never been done before. I'm going to make one of these robot guards break character." Emma was already recording from multiple angles, her phone capturing every word. "This is going to get millions of views," she whispered to the camera. Marcus is literally about to become a legend. What started as a simple approach to James quickly escalated into something far more sinister. Marcus began by standing directly in front of the guard, well within personal space, talking loudly about how fake and robotic the guards looked. "Look at this guy," Marcus said to his phone camera while standing inches from James's face. "He's like a statue. I bet he's not even real. Watch this." He began making exaggerated facial expressions, trying to get James to react. When that failed, he started making loud noises, clapping his hands near James's ears and even jumping up and down directly in front of him. James, trained in the ancient traditions of the guard, remained perfectly still. His eyes stared straight ahead, his breathing controlled, his posture unwavering. He had been trained for this. He had endured much worse during his military service. But what was coming next would test every ounce of his professional restraint. Emboldened by James's lack of reaction and the growing excitement of his online audience, Marcus decided to escalate his challenge. He pulled out what he called his guard testing kit, a collection of items he had specifically brought to try to get reactions from the royal guards. Okay.
Level 2!
He announced to his live stream, which now had over 75,000 viewers watching in real time. If noise doesn't work, let's try touch. This was the moment when respectful tourism died and harassment began. Marcus reached out and actually touched James's uniform, running his fingers along the red fabric while providing commentary for his audience. Whoa, guys, this is actually real fabric. These costumes are like really well made. Emma encouraged him from behind her camera. Try the hat. Everyone wants to see the hat. But Marcus wasn't alone anymore. His bold actions had attracted other tourists who saw that there were apparently no consequences for this behavior. A family from another country began using James as a backdrop for what could only be described as a comedy routine, with the father pretending to march like a guard while the mother and children laughed and pointed at James. Then came a group of teenagers who had been inspired by Marcus's live stream. They began taking turns posing next to James in increasingly ridiculous positions, pretending to kiss him, making bunny ears behind his head, and even attempting to photobomb his stoic stance. "This is insane," shouted one of the teenagers. "He literally can't move. We can do whatever we want." The crowd was growing larger, and with it, the behavior was becoming more extreme. Someone started a TikTok challenge called "On Your Guard Statue," encouraging people to see who could get the most outrageous photo with a royal guard without making them move. But then Marcus pulled out something that crossed every line imaginable. From his backpack, he retrieved a set of face paints, the kind used for children's parties, and held them up to his camera. "Guys, you are not going to believe what I'm about to do," he announced to his now 100,000 plus live viewers. "I'm literally going to paint this guard's face and there's nothing he can do about it." The crowd cheered. Phones appeared from everywhere, recording from every possible angle. Someone started a countdown. 10,
9, 8!
James could see exactly what was happening. In his peripheral vision, he watched Marcus uncap a red face paint marker, the same red as his uniform. The irony was not lost on him. 7,
6, 5!
This was the moment that would define everything. James had served his country in war zones, had faced enemy fire, had stood guard in storms and heat waves, but never in 15 years of service had he felt so utterly helpless. 4, 3, 2. Marcus reached forward with the face paint, and James felt the tip touch his cheek. 1. A red stripe appeared on James's face as the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus had just defaced a serving member of the British Armed Forces, and everyone was treating it like entertainment. But he wasn't finished. What happened next was a complete feeding frenzy of disrespect that would have been unimaginable just decades ago. Once Marcus had broken the ultimate barrier by actually drawing on James's face, every single inhibition in the crowd disappeared. Emma immediately approached with her own marker. "My turn," she squealed, adding a blue stripe to the other side of James's face while her followers cheered her on through the comments section. Within minutes, James's face had been turned into a canvas for tourist entertainment. Someone drew a heart. Another person added polka dots. A teenager wrote "Tourist 2024" across his forehead. But the face painting was just the beginning of the degradation. A woman from a tour group decided to test whether James would react to tickling, producing a feather from her purse and actually tickling his neck while her husband recorded the hilarious footage. Someone else brought out props, a fake mustache that they tried to stick onto James's face, silly glasses they attempted to place on him, and even a ridiculous hat they wanted to put on top of his bearskin cap. The crowd had become a mob, and James had become their victim. "Let's see if we can make him laugh," shouted one tourist, who began telling inappropriate jokes directly into James's ear while others watched for any reaction. A group of college students started a game where they would each try to come up with the most outrageous pose next to James, treating him like a piece of furniture rather than a human being. Someone brought out a water balloon. "I dare you to throw it at him," came a voice from the crowd. "He can't move.
He can't do anything!"
The situation had devolved into complete chaos. James's uniform was being touched by dozens of hands, his personal space had been completely violated, and his face was covered in face paint like he was some sort of carnival attraction. And through it all, not a single authority figure intervened. Security was nowhere to be seen. Palace officials were apparently unaware of what was happening. The other guards stationed at nearby posts couldn't abandon their positions to help. James was completely, utterly alone in his humiliation. But unbeknownst to the mob of tourists who were treating him like their personal entertainment system, someone very important was watching from a window high above the courtyard. Someone who had the power to change everything. Someone who was about to make a decision that would break centuries of royal protocol. Queen Camilla had been in the blue drawing room, engaged in what was supposed to be a routine meeting with her private secretary about upcoming engagements, when the sound of loud laughter and cheering began filtering through the tall windows. Initially, she paid little attention. Tourists were always excited when they visited the palace, and their enthusiasm was generally something to be appreciated rather than discouraged. But something about this laughter felt different. It wasn't the delighted giggling of children meeting a guard for the first time, or the appreciative chuckles of tourists impressed by the pageantry of the changing of the guard ceremony. This laughter had an edge to it, a cruel, mocking quality that made something deep in Camilla's chest tighten with unease. "What exactly is happening out there?" she asked her private secretary, Lady Margaret Whitfield, who was reviewing the afternoon schedule. "I believe it's just the usual tourist activity, Your Majesty," Lady Margaret replied without looking up from her papers. "Perhaps a bit more enthusiasm than usual, but nothing that requires attention." But Camilla's instincts told her otherwise. In her years as a member of the royal family, she had developed a keen sense for when something was wrong, and right now, every alarm bell in her head was ringing. She walked to the window, and what she saw below made her gasp audibly. Her guard, one of her guards, a man who had sworn an oath to protect the crown and everything it represented, was being treated like a street performer. No, worse than that. He was being treated like an object, a piece of entertainment equipment, a human mannequin for tourist amusement. James's face was covered in colorful face paint. His uniform was being touched and grabbed by dozens of hands. Someone was actually taking a selfie while pretending to kiss his cheek. Another person was making bunny ears behind his head while their friend recorded the hilarious footage. "Dear God," Camilla whispered, her hand pressing against the window. "What are they doing to him?" Lady Margaret finally looked up and followed Camilla's gaze. Her own expression shifted from mild interest to horror as she took in the scene below. "Should I call security, Your Majesty?" she asked, reaching for the phone. "Where is security?" Camilla demanded, scanning the courtyard for any sign of intervention. "How long has this been going on?" As if summoned by her words, a palace security officer appeared in the courtyard below. But instead of intervening, he simply observed from a distance, apparently unsure of how to handle the situation without creating an international incident. Camilla watched as the officer approached the crowd hesitantly, clearly struggling with the delicate balance between protecting the guards and maintaining positive relations with tourists who, technically, weren't breaking any laws. "Excuse me," she could see him saying to the crowd, though his voice was too quiet to carry any real authority. "Perhaps we could maintain a bit more distance." The tourists barely acknowledged him. Marcus actually waved the security officer away dismissively, while continuing to pose for photos next to James. "They're ignoring him," Camilla said, her voice rising with indignation. "They're completely ignoring security." She watched as the situation continued to escalate. Someone in the crowd had produced what looked like a permanent marker and was debating whether to write something on James's uniform itself. That's when Camilla saw something that made her decision final and irreversible. A small child, encouraged by adults who should have known better, approached James with what appeared to be a water balloon. The adults were laughing and cheering as they urged the child to throw it at the guard. "No," Camilla said firmly, turning away from the window. "Absolutely not, Your Majesty," Lady Margaret asked, recognizing the tone that meant Queen Camilla had made a decision that no amount of protocol or advice would change. "Cancel my next meeting," Camilla ordered, already walking toward the door. "But Your Majesty, you have the children's charity lunch in an hour, and the protocol states—" "Cancel it," Camilla repeated, her voice carrying the full weight of royal authority. "And cancel whatever comes after that as well. Your Majesty, I really must advise against any public intervention. The protocol for these situations is very clear. We should handle this through proper diplomatic channels." Camilla stopped and turned to face her private secretary, and Lady Margaret immediately recognized the expression on her face. It was the same look Camilla had worn when she'd decided to speak publicly about domestic violence, despite palace advice to remain silent. The same look she'd had when she'd broken protocol to personally comfort victims of the London Bridge attacks. It was the look of a woman who had decided that doing the right thing was more important than following rules. "Protocol?" Camilla said quietly, but with an intensity that made Lady Margaret take a step back. "That man down there has served this country with honor for 15 years. He has put his life on the line for everything we represent. And right now, he is being humiliated in front of our home while we sit up here discussing protocol." She walked to her dressing table and retrieved a simple black handbag, checking to make sure her phone was inside. "Your Majesty, please reconsider. If you intervene personally, it could create a diplomatic incident. These tourists are from multiple countries, and if any of them file complaints—" "Let them file complaints," Camilla said, moving toward the door. "I'd rather deal with diplomatic fallout than look myself in the mirror knowing I did nothing while one of our people was being degraded." Lady Margaret made one last desperate attempt. "Your Majesty, what if the media criticizes you for breaking protocol? What if they say you overstepped your bounds?" Camilla paused at the door and looked back at her secretary with a small, determined smile. "Margaret," she said, "I have been criticized by the media for 40 years. I've been called everything imaginable, had my every move scrutinized, my every word analyzed. But I have never been criticized for standing up for what's right, and I'm not about to start being afraid of that now." With that, Queen Camilla walked out of the room and headed directly for the main entrance of Buckingham Palace, leaving behind centuries of protocol and a private secretary who was already reaching for the phone to warn security that something unprecedented was about to happen. The massive oak doors of Buckingham Palace, each weighing several hundred pounds and normally opened only for the most formal of occasions, suddenly swung wide with a sound that cut through the courtyard noise like a thunderclap. Queen Camilla stepped out onto the palace steps, and the effect was immediate and electric. She wasn't dressed in ceremonial robes or formal regalia. She wore a simple black coat, her signature pearls, and practical shoes. Her hair was perfectly styled, but her expression was unlike anything the tourists had ever seen from a member of the royal family. This wasn't the composed, diplomatic smile that people expected from royalty. This was the face of a woman who had seen enough and was about to put an end to it. The crowd's reaction was like a wave spreading across the courtyard. The first people to notice her fell silent, their phones lowering as they recognized who had just emerged from the palace. The silence spread through the mob like ripples on water, until the entire courtyard had gone from raucous laughter to stunned quiet in less than 30 seconds. Marcus, who had been in the middle of explaining to his live stream audience how he was going to attempt to remove James's hat, found himself staring directly at the Queen Consort of England. His mouth fell open, his hands freezing in mid-gesture, the permanent marker he'd been holding dropping to the ground with a small clatter that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Emma's phone was still recording, but her hand was shaking so badly that the footage was becoming unusable. Her Instagram live stream, which had been filled with laughing emojis and fire reactions just seconds before, was now flooded with shocked comments as viewers realized what was happening. "Oh my God," someone in the crowd whispered. "That's actually her. Is that really Queen Camilla? We are so screwed." Camilla descended the palace steps with measured, deliberate movements. Each step of her heels on the stone seemed to echo through the courtyard with the weight of royal authority. She wasn't hurrying. She wasn't running to intervene like a frantic bystander. She was walking with the dignity and purpose of someone who had every right to be there, who owned the ground she was walking on, and who was about to exercise her authority in a way that none of these tourists had ever imagined possible. As she walked, her eyes swept across the scene with the precision of someone cataloging evidence. She noted the face paint covering James's cheeks and forehead. She saw the way his uniform had been wrinkled and disheveled by dozens of grabbing hands. She observed the phone still recording from every angle, the props scattered on the ground, the complete and utter lack of dignity that had been afforded to one of her guards. When she reached the crowd, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone commanded attention in a way that Marcus's shouting and Emma's squealing never could. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice carrying the precise diction and unmistakable authority of someone who had been trained from birth to command respect. What exactly do you think you're doing? The silence that followed was deafening. Here was a moment where social media influencers, people who made their living by never being at a loss for words, found themselves completely speechless. Marcus tried to stammer an explanation, his California confidence evaporating under the steady gaze of British royalty. We're tourists and we were taking some photos. With the guard. Camilla walked directly up to him, and despite not being a particularly tall woman, she seemed to tower over him. There was something about the way she carried herself, the centuries of royal breeding and authority that flowed through her posture, that made everyone around her feel suddenly small and insignificant. Taking photos? She repeated, her voice remaining perfectly controlled but with an undertone that made everyone in earshot take a step back. Her eyes moved from Marcus to James, taking in the full extent of the humiliation her guard had endured. Is that what you call this? She gestured toward James, whose face was still striped with colorful face paint, whose uniform showed the wrinkled evidence of countless hands, whose dignified bearing had been turned into a mockery by people who saw him as nothing more than a prop for their entertainment. Emma, still recording but now clearly panicking, tried to defend their actions. But everyone does this, she protested, her voice high and desperate. It's like a normal tourist thing. We saw other people doing it online. What Queen Camilla said next would be quoted in newspapers around the world, analyzed by constitutional scholars, and remembered as the moment when someone finally said what needed to be said. Tourist thing? For the first time in the encounter, Camilla's voice rose, and the sound of genuine royal fury echoed off the palace walls. Several tourists actually took steps backward, suddenly realizing that they weren't dealing with a ceremonial figurehead or a harmless old lady, but with someone who wielded real power and was absolutely furious about how that power was being disrespected. This man is not your entertainment. He is not your prop. He is not some sort of street performer put here for your amusement. She turned to address the entire crowd, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard and beyond, reaching the ears of palace staff who had gathered in windows and doorways, security personnel who were approaching from all directions, and the smartphones that were broadcasting this unprecedented moment to viewers around the world. This man is a soldier who has sworn to protect this realm with his life. He has served his country in Afghanistan, where he faced real danger protecting people like you. He has stood in the rain for hours, in the snow, in blazing heat, maintaining the dignity and traditions that you are here to observe, not to mock. The crowd was now completely silent, but Camilla was far from finished. She had 15 years of watching tourists treat her guards poorly, 15 years of biting her tongue and following protocol, 15 years of anger that was finally finding its voice. Do you see this uniform? Do you have any idea what it represents? The history, the sacrifice, the honor that goes into earning the right to wear these colors? She walked directly up to James and, in a gesture that broke every rule of royal protocol but captured the heart of every decent person watching, she pulled out her own personal handkerchief and began, gently cleaning the face paint from his cheek, the image of the Queen Consort of England personally, attending to one of her guards while tourists watched in stunned silence, would become one of the most powerful photographs of the year. It would be shared millions of times, turned into artwork, and remembered as a perfect illustration of what true leadership looked like. I am so sorry, she whispered to James, loud enough for the crowd to hear every word. No one should have to endure this. No one should have to stand here and accept this treatment while representing everything we hold dear. Then she turned back to the tourists. And what she did next changed everything. Camilla faced the crowd of tourists, and her next words were delivered with the full weight of centuries of royal authority. Security, she called, her voice carrying across the courtyard with unmistakable command. Immediately, palace security appeared from seemingly everywhere. These weren't the hesitant officers from before. These were personnel who had just received a direct order from Queen Camilla herself. I want these individuals' information taken, Camilla announced, pointing directly at Marcus and his group. Every single person who participated in this disgraceful display. Marcus tried to protest, his social media bravado crumbling.
But we didn't do anything illegal. Illegal?
Camilla interrupted. You're absolutely right. What you did wasn't illegal. It was something much worse. It was inhumane. She pulled out her own phone, a moment that shocked everyone present. You want to go viral? She asked, pointing the camera directly at Marcus. You want your internet fame? Let me help you with that. The power dynamic had completely shifted. Suddenly, Marcus was the one being recorded without his consent. "Tell the world your name," Camilla said.
Tell them what you just did to a British soldier.
Marcus's face went pale. I don't want to. Oh, but you did want to when you were humiliating him, didn't you?" Camilla's voice was sharp with righteous anger. She turned the camera to encompass the entire group, including Emma, who was now crying. "Look at them," she said into her phone. "These are the people who think our guards are their personal entertainment. From this moment forward," she announced, "anyone who disrespects our royal guards in this manner will be banned from all royal properties. Permanently." The crowd gasped. This was policy being made in real time. She looked directly into the cameras still recording. "To everyone watching, these guards are not your entertainment. They are human beings with dignity, with families who love them. They deserve your respect, not your ridicule." She turned back to Marcus one final time. "You came here for content. Well, congratulations. You got it. But not the kind you were hoping for." Within 30 minutes, the video was trending worldwide. Within 6 hours, it had been viewed more than 50 million times across all platforms. Marcus and Emma's social media accounts were flooded with condemnation. Their follower counts dropped by thousands per hour as sponsors pulled out of partnership deals. Several major brands issued statements distancing themselves from the influencers' behavior. But the impact went far beyond the individuals involved. Queen Camilla's actions sparked a global conversation about tourist behavior and respect for local customs. Tourism boards worldwide began implementing new educational programs. Hotels started including respect guidelines in their welcome packets. Travel influencers began using their platforms to educate followers about appropriate behavior, rather than encouraging boundary-pushing content. The treatment of royal guards at Buckingham Palace changed dramatically with new barriers and additional security. Signs were erected explaining the significance of the guards and the respect they deserved. James Richardson received thousands of letters of support and was later awarded a commendation for his professionalism. A fund was established to support veterans' mental health services in his honor. 6 months later, Queen Camilla told the BBC, "I regret nothing about that day except that it took so long for someone to speak up." If standing up for basic human decency means breaking protocol, then protocol needs to be examined. The incident became a case study in universities teaching tourism ethics. Respect the Guards became a permanent movement, with travelers worldwide sharing positive interactions with local service members. The final message, if you had been there that day, would you have stayed silent or found the courage to speak up? Queen Camilla showed us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply say, "This is wrong," and it stops now. Real authority isn't about following rules. It's about doing what's right. The next time you travel, remember James Richardson standing at his post with dignity. Remember Queen Camilla choosing courage over protocol. This story proves that one person's courage can change everything. It doesn't matter if you're royalty or an ordinary citizen. When you see injustice, you have the power to act. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. If you think Queen Camilla did the right thing, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the world needs more people willing to say enough when they see injustice. How we treat others, especially those who can't defend themselves, defines who we are as human beings. What other stories of courage would you like to see? Comment below and let's continue this conversation about dignity and respect.